be reading individually first, and then we're going to read from our co-written stuff afterwards. So, um, and then maybe there'll be time for us to read the novel that we just wrote 5 minutes ago.
Exactly.
Okay, so some of you have been hearing me. I'm going to have to read a few new pieces I can see because some of you have heard me lately. I usually have the luxury of being able to.
I know.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with uh, a couple of father pieces, I think. Again, microfiction, just for a quick definition, is probably like 300 words or under, although some people would say 400 words or another, and some might say 250. But the anthology I'm going by is 300 words and under, and that's what my ideas. But essentially, I think of it as a page or less. That's the way I can view it. And in terms of my pieces, I think of them as being more like a paragraph, like this. So that's what I'm working with. And oftentimes, these sort of border the pro. I wrote prose poems as well, so I feel like my pieces fall in between somewhere. There's kind of walking this line. So I'm going to start out with a piece that was published both as a prose poem and a microstory called "Remembering My Father's Face." Lying on the couch, my father disappeared like smoke through an open window. Not even his impression on the pillow remained. He had died 40 years ago. Tried to remember what he looked like, but whenever I thought of him, I could only remember his tight, black, curly hair, his rounded shoulders, his pained feet, not his face. I tried over and over again to picture him. I saw him carrying his suitcases up the staircase, his gray fedora tilted forward so I couldn't see his face. I saw him start his electric shaver in his white undershirt, but when he lifted it to shave, there was no face in the mirror, only a bright, burning light. I heard him singing, "It's a quarter to three, there's nobody here." His face a blur of chalk, an erasure, a wind lifting leaves and straw. When the leaves fell, there was only dust and air. So my father was a salesman, so I'll just say that he died in a car accident back um, in the late 80s. And he had a habit of singing songs and misquoting all of them. So there's nobody, it should be, there's nobody in the place but except you and me. And it's from a Frank Sinatra song called "One for My Baby," sung by Frank Sinatra, but written by Johnny Mercer. And I didn't do it justice in terms of the melody, of course, but I didn't even try. So, okay. The next one is a second father piece called "Father and Son Singing." These are actually, normally I'm working in a more fabulous mode where things are sort of more out there about what's happening, but these are closer to being sort of realistic in a sense. Father and son singing. "You don't sing much, do you, son?" my father asks, sitting in his chair in the living room. He sings broken phrases, disconnected words, syllables that could be mantras the way he bends and stretches them. He sings melodies full of coins and fountains of cash. He sings a son who embraces his absence with real love. Now, sitting in my chair, I sing too. Bridges falling into holes, ties dangling from branches, monogrammed handkerchiefs sailing like kites. I sing the belly of my father, hands that rip cardboard boxes in two, his stubbled cheeks and chin, pillowcases stuffed with bills. I sing glossy wingtips sparking on the pavement, suits made of dust, the melody in the covered mirrors. His song ends with a sigh, mine with a gurgle. Neither of us can carry a tune. Okay, so I'm going to do a few comic pieces here. I'll give you there's a laugh track that's following behind me. You can like hear that. This first piece is called "During Sex," and it refers to the Khaleesi at the very end, Khaleesi and the Mother of Dragons. The actress Amelia Clark wore a long silver blonde wig that men all over the world were fetishizing. And that she used to, there was a language for the people that she led because she was considered the Mother of Dragons. And the word Dracarys it was an order to her dragons to torture enemies. Did you get that down in the back there? Taking notes. Okay. Oh, good. I just wanted to know. Okay. During sex, Odalise, her eyes closed, called me Brad, meaning Brad Pitt. Since Brad Pitt has long, dirty blonde hair and is layered with all kinds of muscle, and since I'm on the flabby side, pear-shaped with black hair, always neatly combed, even during sex, I knew she wasn't trying to say I'm her Brad Pitt. I seized up immediately and got off her. I didn't like being on top anyway. She had one of those sunbeam light bulbs that felt as though it were burning the hair off my head. Why did you stop? She asked. Well, you were imagining that Brad Pitt was on top of you, I said. She pulled the covers over her chest and sat up. Last week during sex, you called me Eliza, your first wife's name. And the week before that, with your eyes closed, in the middle of your orgasm, you shouted, Queen Bey. And then on another evening, you whispered, sing for me, Tay-Tay. I could go on. Enough, I said, lying on my back in the memory foam. Who was I to her, and who was she to me? Were we only the vehicles of each other's fantasies? What would happen if I imagined making love to Odalise while actually making love to Odalise? Not sure I really wanted to know. Touched her body and she touched my face. I whispered in her ear, Khaleesi, wrenching her to me. As she rose, she pretended to shake free a shower of silver blonde hair. Her voice grew louder, more forceful, issuing commands in her native language, Pokrass, her dragons flying, breathing fire. The next one, I was going to read this, but I think I'll read it anyway. I feel like it. COVID is in the air. Why not read the COVID piece? This piece, we've locked people out of here. There's a fine young man just walked in. Have a seat. So this next one's called Spring in the Air, and it sort of recalls the early days of the pandemic when everybody was kind of afraid to go in the grocery store and masks were omnipresent. Louder? Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me back there, Levy? Okay. Can you hear me back there? What was that look back there? It was like, does that mean you can hear me or not hear me?
I can hear you.
No, it's not going to hurt back there like the black. Can you hear me? Okay, can you hear this?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I can't talk that loud the whole time. Okay. Spring in here. In checkout lane 3 at the grocery, I feel my nose twitch inside my mask. The two carts closest to the cashier are 6 feet apart, but the rest of us are much closer together. While some shoppers chat briefly, laughing at jokes, while some lean over their carts for support, and some pull out hand sanitizer, rubbing their hands briskly, I scrunch my face to hold back a sneeze. When the guy in the next lane asks me a question, I begin to answer, and without warning, the sneeze escapes. I'm shaken, but quickly hold up my hands and shout into my mask, allergies, I'm not sick. But the other shoppers look at me as if I'm dangerous. Before I can do anything about it, I sneeze again, and my mask sails off like a large butterfly floating over heads until it lands on a grocery conveyor belt 2 lanes away, touching an avocado. The cashier removes the mask with her gloved hand. The shopper says no to the avocado, which the cashier places near her register. The other shoppers move as far away from me as they can. I try to reassure them, but a third, even more powerful sneeze explodes from my mouth and nose. The automatic doors open. The plexiglass windows shake. The shoppers hit the floor, holding their breath, their heads buried in their hands. A sea of droplets and aerosols hangs over them. There's no way for me to clear the air now. For a long moment, the store is silent. The only other person standing is the cashier in lane 5. She smiles and signals me to come ahead. But I'm not next in line, I say. You go, the other shoppers shout from the floor. So I wheel around them, pay for my groceries, and leave the store without another sneeze. They can hear me all the way down the block now. Okay. Um, I'm going to do a couple more of these comic pieces. So this one's called Buy Me a Word. And it is a little bit off my nephew and his parents. You know, they sort of couldn't say no. And this is sort of a piece about what happens when you can't say no. The reference to Attica in here refers to a prison where there was a revolt in the 70s because of the awful conditions. So Attica, just in case you didn't know about that. Buy me a horse. Buy me a horse, our son chants, jumping up and down on the trampoline in the living room, his moose colic raising the ceiling. We say, no horse. For 7 days and nights, he slams doors, crashes into walls, breaks bottles, toys, vases, clay pots, dishes, and picture frames. But we don't budge. Then he puts on his prison stripes and refuses to eat, shouting, Attica, Attica. So we buy him a small horse. The horse sleeps with him in bed. He rides the horse to meals, to the bathroom, into the TV room. The horse lies down and watches TV with our son. They play video games together. The horse laughs when our son laughs. And we are glad our son is laughing, not crying or screaming. For hours each day, we clean up after the horse, scrubbing down the floors, disinfecting the house. Our son is so happy with the horse, but now he wants our room. So we give our son and his horse our room. We sleep on the bed in his room, our arms draped over the side, each of us falling into the floor at some time during the night. The horse is growing, eating buckets of oats, loaves of bread, baskets of apples, and boxes of lettuce and carrots. Let's keep him in the backyard, we say. No, he answers, you stay in the yard. He mounts his horse and drives us toward the kitchen door. So we go out into the backyard and pitch a tent. It's not so bad, really. We have access to the refrigerator and bathroom in the basement, and we cook on the grill. Our son kicks out the glass in the back window and throws out the garbage in green plastic bags. The horse raises a hoof. Senior pickleball. I just want to mention so that you know, senior pickleball. The pickleball is not senior pickleball. Pickleball is the fastest growing youth sport in America, and more seniors are playing it than most people, and also more seniors are ending up in the emergency room. So I just thought I'd bring that out. It's a clue to understand. Anyway, so senior pickleball. My first partner collapsed on the court while in the midst of her serve. As she lay there, she had a smile on her face and a look of pure generosity in her brown eyes. She lifted her paddle and whispered, give it to your next partner. My next partner, a small woman with blue hair and tight skin, had 7 paddles of her own. She played 7 days a week and used a different paddle for each day. Her paddles labeled with the days of the week. She smashed the ball at me with tremendous force, as if she were trying to kill her opponent. Fortunately, most of her returns slashed into the net. Then one afternoon, she rose up in air like a blue heron and slammed the ball into my belly, her shoulder coming out of its socket. She screamed in pain while I attempted to jerk it back into place. She left the court in an ambulance without her Thursday paddle. My next partner, tall and lanky, with long gray hair, held together in a bun with a long stick pin, charged the net so fast she fell over it into my side of the court and was also carried off in a stretcher, her paddle and ball at her side. I played with one more partner, a gentle white-haired woman, deceptively strong for her 80 years. We had some mean volleys that winded both of us, and then on the winning point in our last game, we both charged the net. As I returned her volley, she took a powerful swing that missed the winning shot. but smashed me in the face. When I opened my eyes, she was kneeling over me. You won, she said. Great shot. And then the paramedics put me on a stretcher, tied me in for a wild ride in their ambulance. So anyway, my senior pickleball. Okay. So I'm going to read a couple of serious pieces, then end on a lighter note. Okay. Oh, wrong one. This piece is for a friend of mine who has gotten progressively more ill over the last 10 or 12 years, called The Singer Who Lost Her Voice. The singer lost her voice, and though her lips were perfectly shaped around syllables, only breath came out. For 7 days, she remained silent, gargling salt water to soothe her throat muscle. When she attempted to sing again, her voice wouldn't sound. No matter how much effort she exerted, she couldn't coax or force it out. So she made an appointment with a specialist who nodded knowingly, winked at her, and told her not to worry, that her voice would come back when she didn't expect it. After a long period of time, she didn't expect to hear her own voice anymore. So she thought that as the doctor predicted, it might return. Yet it didn't. Then she went to a healer, poured warm oil down her throat. The oil soothed her throat. There was more silence. She found a witch online who said it was a curse. The witch created a spell to remove the curse that had stolen her voice. I could see her voice in the air flying toward you. Can you see it? The singer shook her head. Open your mouth and let it in, she said. Something might have flown in her mouth. She didn't know. She closed her eyes and sang. Her song was soundless. The palm reader traced the deep grooves of her palm and said, You will sing again, but first you must live like a bird. What did that mean? Build a nest and live in a tree, eat only seeds, nuts, learn to fly? She moved her arms as though they were wings. She ate her food in small, quick bites. She puffed out her chest, threw back her head to sing, but couldn't even produce a whisper. Then she found the guru who had the answer. The guru prayed and chanted. He burned incense. Go home, he said. Drink this tea every night and chant these words, and you will sing. Night after night, she drank her tea and chanted the prayer silently. Then one night she stood in the mirror, a glint in her eyes. Her voice would return now. She was sure of it. She began to mouth one of her favorite songs. White butterflies streamed out, landing on the glass. Then out came rays of gold dust particles and hidden fear. The mirror clouded, then cleared. The song fell back into her throat, like water swirling down a drain. She walked out of her home and looked up at the clear white moon. She steadied herself, inhaled the darkness, and from her lungs and chest, she pushed the song out with all her might. Thousands of sparks flew into the air. And I started reading an older piece. This piece, it's water here. This piece was informed by the incredibly inept and cruel Trump administration, and obviously, I guess, yeah. So I wrote a number of pieces, but this one particularly speaks to his administration. I wouldn't want it mixed up with anyone else. Although it doesn't necessarily. What happened to the country? Some say the president declared the country his and took it home. Some say the country was wild turkeys waddling under the blind blue sky, deer leaping into the foliage, but hunters dispatched them into the next world. Some say that even though hundreds of trucks cranked their winches, the country sank into the quagmire and pulled the trucks down with it, bubbles bursting on the surface. Some say you can still find the country if you have the right map, but so many have followed their maps, disappearing without leaving behind a note or a sign. Though many remember the country with tears in their eyes, and many salute when they hear it called by name, though some decry the country as a false brotherhood. Others believe it was an idea, and ideas evolve into other ideas or evaporate like rain beaded on window frames whose glass has been shattered. Without a country, without a piece of land, there is nothing to fight over. And now all of us are refugees walking in twos or threes toward nowhere anyone can imagine. And I'll finish with one I've been reading at the end of the novel pieces. Some of you have heard it before. It's called Newman's Zone. I was a big fan of Paul Newman growing up. For one thing, he was Jewish, and I am. And so he was like, you're growing up and you're sort of in an anti-Semitic area and you just come out of bad time for everything. You kind of like begin to identify and figure out all the other Jewish people who are successful in some way as figures and models. And Paul Newman was one for me. Also, I mean, movies that I used to see of his, like Full Hand Luke and Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid did Hustler, those kind of movies. So anyway, this is called Newman's Zone. So I thought I did another lighter piece. My lover thought I was Paul Newman, which is probably why she became my lover. One night in bed, I told her the truth. I'm not Paul Newman. She started to laugh. You're a joker, all right, she said. No, really. Paul Newman has blue eyes that are clear as skies. I've got dark, beady brown eyes, Hungarian eyes. He has a square jaw, and I have a weak chin hidden by my beard. I've never made love to Liz Taylor or Dominic Sanda or Joanne Woodward, and I don't drink 2 6-packs in 2 months, let alone 2 hours. Well, she said, your tomato sauce is pretty good. Anyway, thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. It's my close friend, Meg Pokrass, and wonderful flash fiction writer. So I'll let her take over at this point and with a pretend microphone.
Right. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Thanks so much for having me here tonight. It's a real honor to read. I'm just getting over a cold and I can't project very well. So I will probably just read a few pieces, unfortunately, but I will read them. So the first piece, I write slightly longer pieces than Jeff does for the most part. Mine are usually between 200 and 1,000 words. The first piece I'm reading is called Villa Monterey Apartment, Burbank. In California, the earth shakes, Ma said yesterday, crossing an invisible line from Nevada into California. She pushed the gas pedal hard and the car almost jumped. I clapped for her. Today, Ma's meeting with a real estate company to ask for a job, so I get to stay at Tanya's apartment and swim. Tanya is the beauty in the family, 14 years older than me. She has a bronzed face, streaked hair, is addicted to the soundtrack from West Side Story. Her boyfriend, an actor named Sam, smiles at me. He has dark muscles, swimming shorts, Popeye's shoulders stretching out against her avocado shag rug. He just got a part in a TV show. Can you walk on my back with your little bare feet, honey? Sam asks. My dad was old and always looked hurt. I'd hurt him by being so little and clumsy. Once he taught me a lesson about it, and I never touched him again. Maybe Sam doesn't know how bad I am. Tanya won't talk about Dad. She hates him so much, so I pretend I never knew him when I'm with her. Don't make her do that, Sam, Tanya barks, 100 years crawling into her voice. Oh, come on, she's a kid, he says, blowing air. I don't want to hurt you, I say. He stays quiet, waiting. Stepping on him feels soft and hard and squishy. You win, Tanya says. You both fucking win. Tanya is so much older than when she left home to become famous a year ago. She walks out swishing a bright red towel behind her. She's going swimming. A kid can't hurt me, he says. In the pool, they don't talk with words. They just touch each other's faces, bobbing up and down in the deep end. I pretend it's a movie. 7 short palm trees stand in a line behind the pool deck as if waiting for autographs. Mom once told me that smog is invisible once you're in it, and she's right. Everything sparkles in Burbank. The vacancy sign on the apartment building, Sam's neon goggles, the lines of water cascading from my sister's bloodshot eyes. The water bottle from you. I think it's mine's right there.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's yours. Thank you.
Sure.
Next up, I'll be reading a story called Stranded Sea Mammals. Stranded Sea Mammals. I'm standing on the sidewalk across the street, taking a video of my mother on our roof. Since my brother's drowning last year, Mom worries about stranded sea mammals. She's better when up in her perch, binoculars dangling from her neck. I point my camera right at Mom as she flaps her arms around spastically, shouting, "Porpoises and whales!" Someone slams a window down, and the dogs on our block begin to howl. Dad runs out of the house yelling, "Maria, keep it down!" But she stays up there, frozen in time, squinting into the sun like a gargoyle. Mom texts me near sunset. She wants to see the video I'm taking. I climb up and sit next to her, hook my arm around her shoulders. There's a scent of expectation around her, as if this time my movies will explain something. "How was your day, Button?" she asks. "What did you do with yourself?" "Well, Dad and I washed the dog in the tub," I report, "and we have a little more shopping to do." I've processed the video for her, whitewashed it so her skin appears young. But I have no idea how to get rid of the lines of confusion around her mouth, how to enhance her watery smile. "You look great here," I say. She squints at the moving images. "I do look better from this angle," she says softly like a girl. In the video, I can actually see it's her Grand Canyon apron she's holding up for the whales and porpoises to recognize. My brother gave it to her for her birthday last year. She waves it like a flag. And lastly, I'll read a slightly longer piece called The Producer. It's a story written in sections. The Producer. The 90-year-old producer had a hole in his heart, a shaky, unpatchable hole. He wanted me to fill it with kisses, candy, and jokes. I handed him a travel-sized Mars bar that I got on the plane. "Only a monkey," he said, "would offer this old sack of bones a gift from the red planet." He said this because of my newly red hair. He liked to run his skinny fingers through it. I called him the producer because he had always wanted to produce a movie. Sometimes he asked me to write one, told me to create a character role just for him and to make him younger, less shaky, without Parkinson's, less married. That was easy as I imagined him a younger person. The nickname Monkey rubbed off on me. There was a gullible monkey on my shoulder, enjoying the stories he told me about his terrible home life. How his wife carried a loaded pistol around the house, even in her PJs. "She never puts it away anymore," he winked. What a horrible person she was, I told myself, kissing his shivery lips. "That blouse is very flattering on you," the producer said, his face half fallen. It was the same blouse I'd worn every other night in the dining room. I wondered if he had had a mini stroke in his sleep. Half of his face looked younger than the other half, less perceptive. He gazed at me as if I alone provided gravity. The hotels we stayed in had very good food. We would eat in the dining rooms, and middle-aged businessmen would stare with disgusted expressions as the two of us nibbled appetizers and sipped rhubarb gin. They thought he had to be a great uncle or a grandfather. So why was I wearing such a low-cut, decadent blouse? Why were his eyes gripping the rise of my cleavage as if he was pulling himself from some brackish lake? "He's a producer, and I'm in love with him," I wanted to say. "Give me a break. I didn't have a dad," I wanted to scream. They would offer me a weak nod as if to say, "Well, if he croaks tonight, I'm around." My story is filled with love tragedies, and I told the producer all about them. "You should write a screenplay about those," he said, and this really cheered me up. My strong young boyfriends would eventually say that they saw our relationship as a weakness. I never knew what they meant. Their muscular legs would take off for runs or bike rides in the early morning. They were running from me, my mother once said, because often they didn't return. For example, my young husband disappeared after going for a long, mindful ultra run. "I liked the look of that path," he said, and I never saw him again. I knew there were mountain lions around, but they never found his bones. Thankfully, I heard from him just a few years later. He wrote me a postcard from Jakarta to say that his knees, hips, and spine had finally given out. "That's what unhappiness does," he wrote. By the time I was 27, I was tired of the young ones, their perfect bodies, and their deeply unsatisfied souls. When I first met the producer, I arrived at a hotel with my dog. I was still married, but my husband had been missing for a year. When the producer hugged me in the lobby of the hotel, I tried not to cry. "You are tattered and shabby," he said, or maybe I imagined it. His skin was yellow and fragile to the touch. "I like your face," I said. I like your dog, he said. We took the elevator up to his hotel room and he put a Lucinda Williams song on. He had an iPad that he didn't know how to use. He said the one thing he was confident about was the music app. Somehow I can always make it sing, he said. The song that plays in my head now when I remember the producer is something about what happens when we talk. I felt it was corny the first time he played it for me, but now that he is gone, I miss the talks we had, how much he liked my dog, and how it felt as if he was calling to me from someplace close, but very far away. The last time I saw him, he perched on the sofa of our hotel room as if he was ready to fly. We're not the same age, he said. This seemed like an obvious fact and one that might have already been noted. I'm not worried about it, I said. Are you? I took his hand, and it was cold. I wanted to say, please don't fret about nonsense. I yanked him off the sofa and right into my arms. We danced to Lucinda Williams. I felt sad that he'd said it and was shivering a bit. He held me tight as a 20-year-old, but felt light as a paper doll. So weightless, I could have carried him home in my arms. Thank you. You got this.
You want to take that seat or?
Which one do you want? I'll take this one.
Take the one you're most comfortable with. So, Meg and I, started communicating before a reading, like young stuff.
Yeah.
A long time ago. And
When was that? When was it?
back in 2020.
2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it started, we were supposed to be communicating with each other about work, about our books, because we were reading together, and Denise Duhamel, third person. We all traded books and we're supposed to ask each other questions. So she was emailing me and I was emailing her back, and we started emailing every day. It got to the point where it's kind of like, if I didn't get an email from her, I would get, I'd be like, where's my email from Meg? So we were kind of like that. Then we started Zooming together, and we were having such a good time on Zoom. She proposed to me and said, would you write a book with me? So we decided to start writing a book, and we had, the way we started was we began writing pieces in response to each other.
Yeah, we were sort of doing each other. Like Jeff would write a Meg story, I'd write a Jeff story. And we were kind of almost like, I don't know, parroting each other is the wrong way to say it, but we were like doing each other and having a lot of fun. But it was when we started working together, it was a very lonely time because we were right smack in the middle of the pandemic. And it just kind of became this joy, I think, for both of us.
So it evolved. We started out writing in response, and then that went away. Eventually, it was like she might write the first part of the story, and I'd write the second part, and then it developed into she would write a line, like what's called exquisite course. She'd write a line, I'd write a line, she'd write a line, I'd write a line, and the key to the whole kind of thing that we were doing, and why I think it worked pretty well, was that we really trusted each other and never corrected each other. It's like Meg used to be in acting, and she called it like improv. Like she would, no matter, like she may write a line and I would go, and then I'd write a line, and then she'd write another line, and I'd be like, why, what is that? But I would just go with it, whatever it was. So we would just go with it and finish the piece and work on it. And I hate to say this, but I was teaching during a particular period of time, and I had people on Zoom, and I would put them in a chat room and go back to writing my story with Meg, then come back to the chat room, bring them out and talk to them for a while, and go back to writing my story with Meg.
We were writing a lot of stories.
Yeah, we were
writing like crazy. Yeah.
So we ended up going to read a couple of pieces from.
Do you have the book to show, our book to show?
Yeah, 1 minute. Let me get. Well, all right. I'll go get that. So we'll get together and somehow left that in that. Because the bag is so big, I can't tell what's going on. So this is the book we did together, and Meg really. We came up with the idea, and we were talking one day, and we said, well, wouldn't it be fun to do a Chagall? So we kind of pictured ourselves in a Chagall, and she came up with a design. And then and it was a worry about like.
Very proud of it.
And I said, let's remove the background so we don't get sued. So we did. And so this is what we ended up with. And Dennis, Mark Gibbons did such a wonderful job with the book. And I wanted to say that also, this was that's called Kinesis. This was done by Dennis Kalachi, who was here. He designed this book and did the trailer for it. So he did a really wonderful job on that. And he's designed
Many of my books as well. Yeah.
But so we've really taken to writing and editing now at the same time. So we're sort of both involved, and we're doing this all on Google Drive. And so everything's going back and forth. And we've been writing, I guess, since the book, we write in sequences of pieces. So we're going to start out with in our new book, go back to the book that we just wrote, but we're going to start with just 2 new pieces because it's always fun to read something new. Our Bald Man pieces.
We have a Bald Man series.
Yeah, we have a Bald Man. I was loosely based on me. No,
we wrote a new one last night that has a good title. It's what is it? It's Aurora Borealis.
The idea was that you could see the Borealis on the bald head, so because all these people were sending out, we were getting all these, how many images of the Borealis you probably have all gotten from everybody.
Saturation.
I saw it, so we just thought, wouldn't it be fun if it were on the bald man?
Yeah.
So we called it Aurora Borealis. But anyway, this particular piece is called At the Bald Men Society Clubhouse. You're not bald enough, Bob, the president told Elias, whose whole dome was empty of hair, but not his side. There was not a speck or stubble of hair to be found on the president's glowing lump of head. It was a cool night in the desert, and the moon was full, but it did not cheer Elias up. He needed a support group, people to share his stories with about baldness. He remembered the line about how you wouldn't actually want to belong to a club that wanted you as a member. He may have believed that at one time, but he hadn't gotten laid in over a year, and his ex-wife used his photo as a target for darts. The president looked down on him as if he were a hairy wheel of cheese. He shook his head. We can't accept pretenders. But Bob, he said, you're my brother. Bob placed his hand on Elias's shoulder and shoved him out of the door. Elias stumbled toward a family of tall, spiky cacti, their wispy hair blowing around in the dark.
And this story is called Bald in Barcelona. He had been bald for many years and had grown used to seeing his pate grow dimmer and dimmer in the mirrors. But the tonic had given him a head of lustrous black hair. He could hear full-throated birds in the neighborhood bursting into flight outside the dining room window. The trees outside the window were so full of leaves he couldn't even see the sky. A dog he had never heard barked so loudly, it was as if it owned the neighborhood. He could feel the blood rising to his head, the hair seeming to grow another inch even as he stood there taking in the new morning. The phone buzzed against his hip. A sexy woman he had been too embarrassed to ask out was calling him. He answered the phone with a vibrant, thick-haired hola, as if he were a Spanish celebrity drinking his morning espresso. In response, she answered in Spanish and began laughing, as if they had just met and were falling in love. He didn't understand a word of what she was saying, but he felt her sunny voice warming the roots of his hair, like a nest of happiness. I'm coming over now, my Toro, she cooed, and I will be wearing red. When he opened the door, she kissed him hard on the lips, reaching up to grab his hair, and within seconds, he was bald again.
So that's the title piece of our new collection, Bald in Barcelona. So anyway, the other thing is, I just want to, since we alternate, it could be I can be speaking the female voice or she can be speaking the male voice because we're just constantly just following the flow, whatever the language was in each piece. The next one is from our salesman sequence in the book, in this book, The House of Grana Padano, which is a story of 3 cheeses.
We realized that
Parmesan and Grana.
We realized that both of our parents had been in sales at some point. We realized we should be writing salesperson stories. Plus, you and I were both in sales at various times in our lives.
Yeah,
I was in sales a lot. What?
You suggested it.
I suggested it. Yeah.
So we started writing some sales pieces that came out. So this first one is the salesman gets a suit. Okay. The salesman gets a suit. My father walks into a clothing store. Sell me a suit, he says to a thin, bald headed man. Without even looking, the bald headed man pulls a blue silk suit off the rack. This suit is made for you, he says, holding the hanger in his right hand and letting the pants legs drape over his arm. Just feel it. My father brushes it gently with his fingers, as though smoothing out the curls of his own hair. I'm a salesman too, he says. I knew it, the bald headed man says. I could tell the minute you entered the store. The suit is shiny, like the lobby in a posh hotel, shiny like a brand new Cadillac parked in the car dealer's window. My father takes it into the dressing room, and when he comes out, the suit swells with his plump belly. The sleeves of the jacket swallow his hands. The pants legs sweep the floor. He looks short and fat, lost in cloth. This suit makes you look like a whole new man, like someone ready to make a killing, the bald headed man says, and leads him to the mirror. In the mirror, the suit shapes itself to his body, fits him to a T. In the mirror, he's graceful as a shadow, as light on his feet as a cool breeze rustling his pants legs. He leans forward as if telling the suit a secret. He smiles, and the suit smiles back.
um, I'll be my mother, the realtor. Hiding from men like a gorgeous nun, my divorced mother was wedded to her spotless car. She sold houses to newly married couples who were loaded with cash, lucky out of town buyers who took in everything she said about real estate in California as though hypnotized by her beautiful but impractical dresses. She drove them from posh neighborhood to posh neighborhood and talked to them about dreams and possibilities, about living in the silks of luxury and standing with their cocktails on the lovely verandas as they leaned toward the hills. Talk to them about the exotic birds that fly out of twilight and change the lives of everyone who sees them. Beautiful people become beautiful by living in these houses, she would say. At home, late in the evening, she'd tell me the business is drying up. And I learned how to assure her that it wasn't. Learned how to sell her back her own dream that the future was ours.
So the next piece we had a section on Motown. It's actually the book was originally titled "The Fallen Jews of Motown," but we realized there were no Jews in those poems, and there were in Motown,
And there was no
really
falling.
and, no, and many of the poems couldn't find Motown even if they were looking for it. We had also, it was a good excuse to just trigger from songs, actually, you know. So, and not all the songs were from Motown either. But anyway, this first one is called "Picking Up the Moose," which was also the title for the book for a while too. So, "Picking Up the Moose." At a party, I met a moose who was dating a bear. A drink in his paw, the bear was in the corner with a pretty cat with bright violet eyes. What's with these animals, I wondered. The bear looked a little sleazy, but the moose was really very attractive, with big eyes and a prominent nose. She was wearing some kind of strong perfume that attracted and repulsed me. It looks as though your bear has found the cat, I said. She snorted. I took that as a sign she agreed. What do you say we go home together? I asked. I don't take dogs, she said. That seems a little inflexible, I replied. She kicked the ground several times with her hooves. Does that mean she wants to dance, or is that dancing for a moose? My girl was playing, and all the other animals were slow dancing. When she pulled away from me, I barked several times. That got me a lot of nasty looks, but not from the moose, who faced me again. Forget the bear, I said. I took off my mask. I'm not a dog, I said. Well, what are you then? She said. She took off her mask and she was still a moose. I saw the bear outside the window chasing the cat up a tree. The moose began shifting her weight back and forth on her long legs, and pretty soon we were dancing cheek to cheek.
And mine's called Memories of Motown. It makes me sad to think about how my father, the magician, loved to dance with me, how he turned me in the living room to Love Is Here Standing By or My Girl. I'd stare up at him like he was my Houdini, and he'd lead me right into his own haze of smoke, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He danced with me instead of my sister, danced with me instead of my mom, a slippery grin on his face, oblivious to anything but moving with me to the music. My sister cried until my mom held her, swaying together in the living room. Slow dancing to Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, as my father folded me so far into himself that for the rest of my childhood I disappeared.
So the next two are from a section called The Curse of the Family. Not that there's a family.
Your sisters are here tonight.
The Curse of the Family. So the first one's called Abandoned Father. And then Meg has these two pieces sort of speak to each other. Abandoned Father. My daughter tilts her head back and shields her eyes from the sun. She has come looking for me, wanting me to come back to her, to hug her against my chest until she can close her eyes and forget my absence, until she can remember only how she rode on my shoulders, bobbing up and down, screaming with laughter. But I'm not the father she wants to remember. I'm the father who is fading from her eyes and memory, the father who rises into the clouds like a vapor from the drops of moisture on the grass, the father who will soon fall back to earth in the heavy rains.
And this is our last piece, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
It's
Q&As.
right. It's called Fatherless Daughters. In springtime, abandoned daughters burst like myopic butterflies with binoculars attached to their faces while they try to identify their absent fathers, who zip through the clouds like geese. But they're not geese, and they have no sense of direction. Can you see me down here, Dad? One abandoned daughter trills. Well, one father zigzags ever closer to the sun. It's hurting my eyes, he yells, waving his pale wings like flags. Another abandoned daughter spots a cloud in the shape of her father and flies through him again and again. He wasn't much of a father, she says. He's better as a cloud. Another daughter shouts, Heads up! As her father falls from the sky headlong into the crowd of abandoned daughters. The other fathers cringe and avoid looking down. They're out to get us, they say. They want money or hugs or something. The daughters, tired of treading air, fling themselves toward their fathers, eager to bring one home, even if he's someone else's father, even if he never earns another dime, even if he sheds all his feathers. But the fathers prove elusive, no longer really fathers.
So thank you. Are there, I think we're doing QA, a little bit of a Q&A if anybody has any questions.
Well, I have a question. In those ones you were just reading,
Yeah,
were those each one was co-authored by both of you,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
you just chose who read them? Just
yeah. In like sort of just
Yeah,
relationship. Like we could have been, we kind of wrote one sentence after
one
another.
sentence after the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
was it really literally one sentence?
Sometimes it would be two sentences, and sometimes
Yeah.
somebody would get an idea, like,
Please,
like,
yeah.
oh, I got an idea for the ending, let me do it or something. But pretty much it was fully co-written.
And the bald pieces were literally written one sentence after the other. These days we're really
Together.
doing sentence together on a live Google sheet.
Yeah,
Just as a listener, they flow very beautifully together. Each one. I mean,
Thank you.
it never feels
Thank
like
you.
it doesn't have this feeling of two different authors, except for in the sense of two who have made one.
It's
Yeah.
very strange. It's a wonderful process. It's bizarre.
It's lovely to hear, and I also feel I sense the liberation of writing non-autobiographical stuff,
Yes.
which nevertheless touches on these incredibly deep universal
Yes.
truths, like the things about the father, like fatherhood, the way you kind of drop in on these some horrific or huge loss or trauma or abusive thing. It's all kind of touched on, but you managed to keep a light feeling to it, so
Thank
it's
you.
palatable and also delightful.
oh, thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. So it was, I mean, one thing, it's funny because I don't know if I put that from the book, but Italo Calvino has this wonderful essay called Lightness, which is about releasing the weight of things. And I think that was sort of something that we had, we
Mhm.
talked about quite a bit, that whole idea of things rising, kind of like letting them slip away from their earthly connections to kind of find something else. So, yeah, but are there other, yeah,
Yeah, I have one. So it's about your process. So you're sharing a Google Doc.
Yeah.
Are you in real time both on that doc?
Yeah,
Or are you coming
are.
back and forth as,
yeah,
so time really isn't passing. You're going
yeah.
through and.
We meet on
doing
Zoom.
one.
I'm in Scotland, obviously, and
Yeah.
it's here, and then we do it on a live Google Doc line after line. It's like a game or like
Yeah.
improvisational
The
theater.
new pieces are all like that.
Are you also in audio contact with you on a
Yeah,
call? Okay.
yes.
Yeah. And
That's very important that we can talk to each other during the writing.
yeah, I have to say that I just have been hours on the phone with T-Mobile because my FaceTime calls have started getting charged. And I'm trying to figure out why that's happening. But yeah, other questions? Jared?
We have a question on Zoom from Jeff Harvey. Megan, Jeff, I loved your reading. With such short form, what do you focus on for endings?
Friend?
Endings.
Yeah.
Endings are really hard. They're notoriously hard. And I feel like it's different every time. Like there's definitely not a formula.
It's
It
different.
often ends before you think it ends. So you'll write your first draft and then you realize the ending is a line or two earlier than it really is. So we try to, I think as writers, we try to sum things up, and that's when we go off the rails. So it's usually back a few lines. That's a simplification, but yeah.
I'll go with it. I mean,
Okay.
that sounded pretty good to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably different for the way we end our pieces and co-writing them, you know. But then, I mean, there may be some truth to that in both of our writing thing. I think sometimes, like I used to, there was a point where I like my endings to be more open-ended, you know.
Yeah.
And early when I was just writing poems and lines, I was kind of listening for a sound that I wanted to end the poem on, you know. I was like Gates is sailing to Byzantium. I love that ending because I wanted to just use his ending. I thought I'll put that in all my poems and nobody will notice. But yeah, and then I tend to like having it a little bit more open-ended toward the ending. So I don't always know where it's going to end it, because if you know where it's going, as Robert Frost said, no mystery for the writer, no mystery for the reader. But yeah, that's why I feel. I think you feel the same way.
Yeah, definitely.
We've had other questions.
Well, I wanted to extend what you said. You keep all of this. I hear you're going after little things that I wonder how much they really bothered you. One thing you mentioned about lines around her mouth, lines of confusion around her mouth.
Mhm.
That's a tough thing to say,
Yeah.
but I wonder if, because I've found this when I've written about my father, my parents, that you start with these little funny quirks,
Right.
but do you both tend to spiral into real anger or just really serious issues?
A lot of my stories
And you
may be
try to
very-
get back out of it.
It's a really great question. It can be writing these emotional pieces, like some of the ones I read tonight that were my solo pieces. I feel like I disappear a bit when I'm writing them, and it can be very emotional, which is why setting a timer is a good idea. So you've got to stop writing. That's what I do anyway. How about you?
Well, I think when I was writing, more traditional poems and lines, I spent a lot. My early books were really a lot about family, work,
Yeah.
and then the Bible pieces. 'Cause I grew up reading fables, fairy tales, and biblical pieces, infused or informed all those pieces. I went back and forth between the two kinds of work.
Yeah.
But as I've gotten on, I've really moved away. I mean, I think the autobiographical element is in there, but it's tangential. Like I've gotten into,
Yeah.
into detail telling and kind of building a reality around that, because I feel like I think so. And it's funny, I've come back through that same way of writing to writing about my family in a different way, because and I'm not saying it was always angry, because there was humor, there was all sorts of stuff, but there's many of my political poems are kind of fairly angry, but I think there's a whole different way of viewing things that I had early on. Like I said, it's gone through this ideal of tale or the fable, and it's come back around, so that there's the autobiography in there is put in a different way than it is. You couldn't exactly say.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of one of the like buy a horse, buy my son a horse. That piece. It's like I wouldn't exactly say that's autobiographical, but then there's an element of truth.
I
in
think
the
mine
piece.
might be a little bit more autobiographical, and I actually do sort of go into the emotion. Like
Yeah.
I think I pull on some of the skills I learned as an actor a long time ago.
I came up with that question right off the bat. As soon as you said my father couldn't sing,
Yeah,
I mean, to me, that was almost the number one reason my mother left my father.
Oh, really?
You know, I mean, he was tone deaf, and she played classical piano
Oh,
for 10
God.
years, and she just absolutely couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he was also
Wow.
abusive, but you think, oh, that's really cute. It's so funny. He
But
can't,
it's not
doesn't
funny.
remember the
But
words,
then-
but
Right.
oh my God, there's
Yeah,
so
they-
much beneath it.
Yeah, right. That was like,
Exactly.
they're not actually connected, but that, those are examples of pieces where I've come back to writing about it in another way, the whole idea of singing, and that was actually something my father would say, you don't sing much, do you, son? And, I don't know. So it somehow ended up in the piece. I don't know. Guess, other questions or do we, Jared.
Another question from Zoom. Who edits the co-written pieces? And how do you decide a piece is done if there are your two pointed views?
We edit as we go along, actually, these days. Like, we'll sort of, after we finish a piece, we'll look at it right away and go, okay, this isn't working, this is working. And so we both, I think, equally involved in the editing process as well.
And then we put it away. I mean, then, we could think it's great and finish that day, and then the next day we might look at it and go, it's really terrible.
Well, there's that, yes.
There's that element.
You gotta
There's-
have the detachment a few days later to know if it's
Yeah.
any good.
Yeah, but we kind of get this idea it's finished when the night we know we have to leave it a little bit before we make any decisions on it, because you just get done writing it and it's a whole different experience when you're writing with somebody else. I mean, I've done translation projects, but this has been so close to working together. It's been so much fun that it changes the whole nature of
Yeah.
writing. You know what I mean? It's not like so much you're off by yourself doing something, but it's kind of like it's all I don't know. There's just some sort of kind of dance that goes on. When we're
Yeah.
doing this. Yeah.
We're often laughing while we work.
Yeah. So other questions? So, okay, well, did we exhaust you? Okay, well, anyway, thank you all.
Thank you guys so
for
much.
coming.
Really.